So the key words here in these instructions is the portion which applies to you should be lined out. That means you cross out what line applies to you. So I'm going to read this. And I know, Mark, I would expect that you've probably never lined any paragraphs out on page 4, have you, before you've gotten your passport, right?
No.
Yeah. But that's okay. We're going to fix that. We're going to fix that in the second of this discussion. We're not going to do that this evening because this is a lot of information coming at you. So here we go. I have not, since acquiring United States citizenship, nationality, been naturalized as a citizen of a foreign state, taken an oath or made an affirmation or other formal declaration of allegiance to a foreign state, entered or served in the armed forces of a foreign state, accepted or performed the duties of any office, post, or employment under the government of a foreign state or political subdivision thereof, made a formal renunciation of nationality either in the United States or before a diplomatic or consular office of the United States in a foreign state, or been convicted by a court or court-martial of competent jurisdiction of committing any act of treason against or attempting by force to overthrow or bearing arms against the United States, or conspiring to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States. Here's the big one. Here's the zinger. If that wasn't enough, here it goes. Furthermore, I have not been convicted of a federal or state drug offense or convicted of a sex tourism crime, and I am not the subject of an outstanding federal, state, or local warrant of arrest for a felony, a criminal court order forbidding my departure from the United States, or a subpoena received from the United States in a matter involving federal prosecution for or grand jury investigation of a felony. If you didn't mark that out and you didn't put a line through all of that language, the first thing when you go into the passport application office, they immediately look for someone who knows what they're doing. And if you line out page 4, which I've done twice, so bottom line, if you did not mark out what applies to you, you agreed basically that you have committed acts of treason against the United States, you've attempted to overthrow or bear arms against the United States, or put down or destroy by force the government of the United States, and you've been convicted of a sex tourism crime, and all of the above. So bottom line, you're agreeing that you're a terrorist. This is evidence, again, since my case that I've gone through way back in 2003 with the priest, March 13, 2003 is where that criminal case was lodged. And I saw that there was things going on in that court that didn't make any sense to me, that were completely outside of logic and against the law, the true law. But because the laws changed in the United States from equity to civil law, which if you look that up in Black's Law, I forget which edition, it says civil law is Roman law, Roman canon law. Bottom line, it's under the Vatican. And all of that can be proven. A lot of people have proven it in great detail. So this affects you, this affects me. And we could fix this now, but something tells me that there are two things happening at the same time. Now I'm going to go to some more source material, and just bear with me here because I have a lot of information and I'm doing what I can to keep it as simple and as organized as possible. So basically, the United States is a corporation. And this is defined in 28 U.S. Code, subsection 3002, under 15. So it says the United States means A, a federal corporation, B, an agency, department, commission, board, or other entity of the United States, or C, an instrumentality of the United States. There's a lot of other interesting things in there, but I don't want to get off track. We'll keep it very simple here. Okay, now I'm going to go to Dun & Bradstreet. Usually people sign up with them so that they can initiate and get credit and so on and so forth, and be able to build that credit. And believe it or not, courts have a DUNS number. Most of them have it. But if you don't have an EIN number, you're not going to be able to get it. So let me just share this one with you. The DUNS number for the United States government is 0527149196. And again, it stipulates Title 28, 3002, 15, A, B, and C. It is stated unequivocally that the United States is a corporation. This all occurred without the people's consent by the 41st de facto Congress in 1871. I want to also, just before we get into what de facto means, basically what you have here is you have the U.S. Department of Defense with a DUNS number, U.S. Department of the Treasury, U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Department of State, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Education, Energy, Homeland Security, etc. It goes all the way down, even to the United Nations, even to individual states, like DUNS number for each of the U.S. corporate states and its largest cities. So, state of Indiana, for example, 0717899435. So these are all corporations. The state of is the corporate side of these states. Now, what's really twisted here, if you look from the College of William and Mary Law School Scholarship Repository, Faculty Publications, 2005, Are the States Sovereign by Timothy Zick, Z-I-C-K, basically talking about what if the states are sovereign, and in fact they are. And then it goes on, states as nation. Okay, so page 319. Let's see if I could go down here and read this for you. And this is not the only source. I've actually gone and looked at this beforehand just to make sure that there was some kind of a government manual that could back this stuff up. So again, you have two systems side by side. There's one that is the de jure, and there's the other that's the de facto. The de jure is the republic, the de facto is the empire. This empire that basically is an overlay on top of the United States and their original capacities. So page 319, it basically says that states are nations, and it goes into your individual state. So if you're from California, you're going to be called a Californian. So literally, your nationality is going to be the state where you live. You know, it's not necessarily where you were born, because if you move from state to state, your state is going to be where you are. That's pretty much the basic information, is that the states are nations. And are they sovereign? Well, we'll find that out through more inquiry. The other thing that I'm going to find here is the U.S. government manual that also says the same thing that Timothy Zick says. So when you go back to the page 4 of 4, it says that you're going to need to provide an explanatory statement under oath or affirmation. Okay? So part of the explanatory statement and the oath is going to catalog this information so that whoever is behind the desk, they see that you have done your due diligence to research and make sure that you know what you're talking about when you do this thing. So the style manual here confirms what Timothy Zick is also talking about. This is the 2008, an official guide to the form and style of federal government printing. So yes, this comes from the U.S. Government Printing Office. And when you go down to nationalities, etc., 522, it says, the table shows forms to be used for nouns and adjectives denoting nationality. In designating the natives of the states, the following forms will be used. So if you're from Wyoming, you're a Wyomingite. If you're in New Mexico, you're a New Mexican. If you're in Indiana, you're an Indianian with an I there. So this just helps to list out what that nationality is. Where did this all even come from? When I was before a judge, the judge asked me, why are you doing what you're doing? Because I went before him and I said, I don't know what to do. I said to him, First of all, I need to know if there are such things as courts of equity. I believe there's a jurisdiction of equity, but I can't necessarily find one. And I cited the Texas code that went with that because, again, I saw what Eric Phelps did and I wanted to do it for myself. And he was able to get a decree stipulating he is not the all caps name. And thereby, in addition to that declaration, he's made it clear that he is not surety for that all caps entity. Because just like they said that the United States is a corporation, then they said that the states are corporations and they have EIN numbers. Well, when babies are born, you look on the birth certificate and under the mother it says informant. And so that baby has an all caps name. Another thing that's very important just to take notice of is any use of the words sovereign citizen. That's not a good idea. Those are flag words that Homeland Security looks out for. So that is not something that has to do with what I'm talking about. Everything I'm saying is backed up. So when I went before the judge, I said, yeah, my friend Eric Phelps in Pennsylvania was able to get a decree signed by Judge Klein stipulating he is not the surety for this all caps entity, and that he uses this all caps entity as a private business trust so he can conduct commerce, just like the Donald Trump letter says, the U.S. federal person, as was read earlier. So the bottom line is we do need a way to interface in commerce. So how do we do that and not end up becoming debtors? There were other judges in the past, 1901 specifically, and when I was in front of the judge that I was talking to back just a couple of years ago, I was telling him that my friend Eric was able to get this decree, and I need a decree to say something along the lines that I am not surety for this all caps name. And he says, well, do you want to do a name change? And I said, I wish I could do that, but I have a document that's filed in Georgia saying that that was never my name. It was never mine to begin with. So if I got a name change, I would be agreeing that that was my name at some point, which I can't agree to. I had 2 hearings with this fellow, and he was wonderful. The second time when I went in there, the entire court was empty. It was completely empty. And he came down, no robe. And he had his coffee in his hand. He says, come on down. And he waved me down. I'm looking around like, oh yeah, that's the judge, because I was expecting him to come up from the front. In the first conversation we had, the first hearing, the door was open and the flag was down. Okay. The only reason I knew that was because I looked at the pictures before I went there and I was like, oh yeah, the flag should be there. But there was no flag on that wall. The first time there were still people in the gallery, and I'm just like, I don't feel comfortable talking with these people there. And I even said that to the judge. I was like, I don't feel comfortable talking about this stuff with people in the back that can hear me. I said, can we get another hearing? And he's like, well, sure, okay, no problem. So I said, I'll get back to you on your calendar for that, because I needed to sift some things through with my schedule, because I was doing some traveling at that time. So the second time I went in there, it was wonderful, and I spoke with him for over an hour, and I actually showed him Eric's paperwork in advance. I mailed it to him, and I said, this is what I'm trying to do in Texas, and I've been reading through everything, and I can't find the same thing that Eric did. The first thing he says to me, well, what is your pleasure? And that's when I said, I'm having a problem. I don't know what to do to get the government to see me as to who I really am and not this other thing. They can construe me as this thing with the birth certificate. So I held up my baby birth certificate with the feet on it, and I said, this is foreign to that jurisdiction. And I said, here's the other one with the all caps name where they opened a corporation, a quasi-corporation, on my all caps name. So I said, I'm not too sure what to do about this problem. And he just smiled and said, you are who you are. He says, well, let me ask you this. He says, why are you doing what you're doing? And I said, okay, this case doesn't count, but here's the best way I can explain why is because of this. So this is a 1901 case. Justice John Marshall Harlan said the following. He says, the idea prevails with some. Indeed, it found expression in arguments at the bar that we have found in this country substantially 2 national governments. Keep in mind, this is not case law you're going to want to use in court, by the way. he was dissenting in this case. Two national governments, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independently of that instrument, meaning the Constitution, by exercising such powers as other nations of the earth are accustomed to, page 380. He says further, I take leave to say that if the principles thus announced should ever receive the sanction of a majority of this court, a radical and mischievous change in our system will result. We will, in that event, pass from the era of constitutional liberty guarded and protected by a written constitution, de jure federal republic, into an era of legislative absolutism, the de facto national Jesuit empire. It will be an evil day for American liberty if the theory of a government outside the supreme law of the land finds lodgment in our constitutional jurisprudence. No higher duty rests upon this court than to exert its full authority to prevent all violation of the principles of the Constitution. Page 382, Associate Justice John Marshall Harlan, Downs versus Bidwell, 182 U.S. 244, etc. So the evil day arrived for constitutional jurisprudence on April 25th, 1938, with the court's decisions of Erie Railroad Company versus Tompkins. And Eric Phelps goes into all this in his 3-day course.